I want to note that Josh came up with the completely destroying our workplace productivity part, although I will admit there is an awful lot of content to find on the Internet Archive, and I'm not especially accustomed to speaking into microphones. And what's more than that, this is the first time that I'm giving this talk, so thank you so much for coming and being my guinea pigs. Well, as Josh has already noted, I'm Barbara Miller, and by the end of this talk, I hope that if you're interested in not just searching and downloading Internet Archive materials, but uploading uploading your own data to the Internet Archive, that you'll be able to do that with a cool command line tool and not just via the web interface. I've had an amazing opportunity over the past year to actually work with the Internet Archive remote here in Portland. And like most of you, I guess, I've known about the Wayback machine for years. I'd even read that the Internet Archive offered other digital archiving services. I read this, I think, on the earlier version of the website, which, you know, by the time I started looking for this information was looking a little bit old and tired, but it's been updated to version 2 of the archive.org website, which is up on the screen now. But, you know, so when I read about the archiving services that the archive offers, I didn't quite believe it, you know, initially, you know, on the old kind of somewhat tired-looking website that has only fairly recently gotten switched to what we see up on the screen now. I didn't believe the part about the unlimited, free archives, digital archives with metadata, even all of the custom metadata fields that you might like to add yourself. I didn't believe it. But I have in the past year learned that it is in fact true that the Internet Archive offers you, with an account on the site, unlimited, free, digital storage with metadata, even your own custom metadata, whatever you want, whenever you want to add it. And I'm here today to show you some cool tools to help you use the Internet Archive's awesome resources. Let's start with just a little bit more about the archive. The Internet Archive is, in fact, officially a California library, a 501c3 nonprofit. It's guided by the aspiration to offer universal access to all knowledge. Universal access to all knowledge does mean that there is almost no censorship on items that are uploaded to the Internet Archive. And, you know, for anyone who's at all sensitive, I certainly want to offer a trigger warning. It's pretty easy when you're browsing around the archive or searching archive collections the way that we'll be doing in just a few minutes, to run into some items that are not at all politically correct. So if that's a problem for you, I'm not going to pull up anything myself that I think should be a problem for anyone, but if you are browsing around yourself, you can certainly run into some things that might give you pause occasionally, and simply realize that information is there because of this incredible access that the Internet Archive offers to people. A little bit more about the archive. We're saying these days that that the total collections amount to more than 25 petabytes of data. There are 2 to 3 million visitors a day. No visitor IP addresses are stored. We honor patron privacy. You know, the website itself gives you some, you know, further details on, you know, just how much the archive contains. Currently, over 510 billion pages are archived in the Wayback Machine. There are 10 million ebooks and texts. The Internet Archive is, you know, is in fact actually scanning books at the rate of 1,000 a day. And apart from all of the book and text content that's available via archive.org, the Internet Archive also offers openlibrary.org. This project's particular mission is to, at some point, it's not there yet, but at some point have a record for every book that has ever been published in any language, any place in the world. I'll come back for a moment to the archive.org site. There's also a huge video collection. 2 million videos. The best known video collection is the Prelinger Archive. And beyond that, another project has archived at this point over 800,000 TV news broadcasts. The most topical part of the video archive these days is the political ad archive. Oops. The political TV ad archive has been in the news quite a bit recently because not only are they archiving political ads, but they are doing, you know, essentially a live rebroadcast of the presidential debates with fact-checking going on as it happens. So, you know, this may be something you want to check out sometime soon as well. You probably won't be surprised here that there are also audio archives. More than 3 million audio recordings total, including among other things, LibriVox free audiobooks. And, you know, some people who know just a little bit more about the Internet Archive than the Wayback Machine know that Grateful Dead fans have collected an amazing number of Grateful Dead concert recordings on the site. Beyond the Grateful Dead concerts, there are, I scrolled that down too far. There are more than 160,000 concerts from 6,000 different bands. There are also software archives. These have been in the news quite a bit recently as well. There are more than 100,000 software items on the site, and the software items include, in many cases, you know, emulation so that you can play the games, for instance, that are archived on the site itself. There are other software titles apart from games as well. The most popular of the games on the site is an emulation of Oregon Trail that I understand is being used in lots of schools these days. So that's something you might search for on the site, where where you won't run into any content that's especially objectionable. And highlighted in the menu bar, there's also a similarly large collection of images, over 1 million total, with the most famous of those, the most well-known of those being NASA images that are collected on the site, including a solar system collection. So that's an overview of the variety of collections and projects that are happening at the Internet Archive. Since we've made it through that introduction, let's go back and talk just a little bit more about the Wayback Machine. And in fact, let's do this. You've probably, if you're like so many people, you've probably at least searched once for a site in the Wayback Machine, and it's pretty obvious how to do that. I won't review that with you. What I would like to point out is that you also have the capability on this page, archive.org/web, to save a page simply by typing the URL in this box and pressing Save Page. Or what you can also do is create a bookmarklet like this Wayback Save that I have in my Firefox toolbar here. And the way that you create that is not in my terminal window, but this slide, one of a couple of slides that I've prepared for this talk, since so much is really nicely available on the website itself. This Save Page Now bookmarklet is a bit of JavaScript code that you can add to the location field of a bookmark. And with that bookmarklet saved in your browser's toolbar, you can go to any site and click Wayback Save, and that site will be saved in the Wayback Machine. I'll go back to that slide for a moment if you want to try to check what's going on there, but it's not really very much at all. It's just a window open with the URL of the Wayback Machine plus slave plus save and a location href. If you're curious about getting some data that's saved, some data about what is saved in the Wayback Machine, there are a couple of different APIs that you may want to know about. Really, there are. There it is. The one that's easiest to use is the Wayback Availability JSON API. You can query the Wayback Machine with a simple URL in this form, archive.org/wayback/available $URL equals the URL that you're curious about. And I think in this next window, I've actually loaded a query like this in the browser, querying for PyDX.org and including a query on a timestamp, which is pretty familiar format of a 2-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day. It can be followed you can follow that, of course, with hours, minutes, and seconds as well. And what this query returns is JSON indicating a single snapshot in the Wayback machine that's closest to any timestamp that you specified, or the current time if you don't specify a timestamp. And there's a little bit more information about the availability API as we scroll down this page. And a link here also to the Wayback CDX server API, which is kind of the grown-up version of this API that actually allows you to query directly the data layer that the Wayback machine itself, well, not just to query that layer, because of course you're doing that with the availability API as well, but it's actually returning the Wayback CDX server API returns to you actual data records that the Wayback machine uses to look up URLs. And I have a sample. There's further documentation of the CDX server API here on GitHub, and there is a sample of using that search here. If you give it a single URL, it will return to you all of the snapshots that it's recorded for that URL. And these are the results for PyDX.org. All right. Those are my quick tips on the Wayback machine. Let's go back to archive.org now, and we'll take a look at an item page for the sort of item that I'm hoping some of you may be interested in learning about uploading yourself to the archive. This particular one is something that I uploaded for a Buddhist community that I've worked with, and is a single item page amongst the archives, the archive.org collections. I started out by uploading items like this using the archive.org website interface itself. But in fact, there's a much faster, better way if you have more than one or two files to upload, and that's what I'm going to be showing you in just a minute. But just for the record, especially maybe for those of you who might be wanting to do something like this on a Windows PC, once you've signed in, you can click on this upload button and upload an item via the website GUI. What I'm going to talk about in the rest of my talk is the Internet Archive Python library and command line tool. And I do want to give a shout out to Vicky Brasseur, who's presented a tutorial here at PyDX this week. I don't at this point know exactly the details of how she was involved with the Internet Archive Python library and command line tool, but she did enough to be listed as an author. So I definitely want to give credit to her for putting together, for helping to be a part of this great command line interface to the archive and the terrific documentation that's available for it. Yes. I think at this point, Let's switch to a command line, and probably this wants to be just a bit bigger than it is. Can everybody see that pretty well, or? Yeah? Okay, great. Thanks. So I'm going to be demonstrating how to use the command line tool, but there is absolutely a Python library that has identical functionality. Basically, the command line tool, may be really helpful to use yourself or to show to someone else who might be working with an archive, the same archive that you might be working with, but who's not a Python programmer and doesn't have any particular call to do any elaborate programming around accessing items on the archive. I'm going to be using it from the installation of the Python library itself, installing that best in a virtual env. Also installs the command line tool. And the first command that you're going to want to do on your own systems, and this is required only if you're going to upload to the archive. If you just want to search for items and download items, you don't need to take this step. But if you do want to upload, you'll need to start by giving the IA configure command before you move on to anything else. And you'll have to do this about once a year, is my understanding right now. I don't have the full details on exactly what happens after a year, but you do this once and forget about it until you have to do it again a little bit down the road. I've already done this, so I'm not actually going to walk through the command itself, but that's a great thing to be aware of. Generally, all of the command line tool commands are, it works a bit like Git does. You type in IA and then the command. And the first one I'm going to show you is IA search. Actually, let me start, in fact, by showing you IA help. This, of course, will give you pretty full details in a standard Unix command line tool format about what you can do with the IA tool. And much as you'd expect from any data store, you can do things like search, you can upload, download. You can upload and download items or files. You can check metadata with the metadata command. You can search for items, and you can use the list command there to list all of the files that are part of a particular item. Let's do a quick search just so that I can show you the output. What I'm doing here, and I'm giving it more parameters than sometimes will be necessary, but it's, as we've discussed, there's all kinds of content in the Internet Archive, and simple searches will often return an enormous amount of information. And if you want, to look at only a few items for a particular, query, you can include this parameter, this, not so pretty flag parameters, page equals 1, rows equal, the number of rows that you want it to return, the number of items that you want your IA search to return. And you can limit it in a variety of other ways. Here we've specified that we want to return items that include the term Jupiter, and we want to return those items only from the collection, from the Internet Archive collection, solar system collection. And by default, the results are presented like this. You know, with the notation identifier and then the item name. There's the item name for the first one. And one very helpful way to limit the search is to say that you want in fact to create an item list, which will give you only the item names. So we'll add item list. We'll make sure that we've spelled it correctly. And instead, now we get a list that includes only the names of the items, not the reminder that these are, in fact, identifiers of items. And it looks like I'm going just a little bit, getting just a little bit long here, so I'm going to try to speed this last little bit up. Probably at this point I should try quickly to tell you just a little bit about Internet Archive items. What exactly is an Internet Archive item? And this, you know, it doesn't have a particularly great real-world mapping. It's a logical thing in the Internet Archive. It's a single file or a group of files that's deserving of its own metadata. And you know, just as a reminder, we saw a single item page here. You know, we've got you know, some metadata details connected with it that are displayed here. You know, anytime you want to record this sort of metadata about a thing that you want to upload to the archive, you're going to want to create an item for it. And you know, for example, items on the Internet Archive can be a variety of things: a book, a single song, an entire album of songs, a data set, a movie, a single image, a group of images. You know, any of these things can be uploaded to the archive as an item with its own single set of connected metadata. The only limits on items are a single item generally should not be more than 100 gigabytes and should generally not contain more than 10,000 files. Those are the limits. The archive will honor takedown requests from copyright holders who contacted and can prove that they have copyright on an item, but there isn't an awful lot of other limits on what you can upload to the archive. And you can download items from the archive as well as upload items to the archive via the command line. And you know, again, just looking at the command line, if you need any reminders on exactly what you can do with a tool, you can do IA help. And I will point to the quick start or the command line documentation for downloading items. You can download an entire item simply by including the item name. Often an item will include various files. For instance, any audio item that gets uploaded to the archive will be converted to a variety of different audio formats. And if you want only, say the OGG format audio for a file, you can specify that you want to download only that file. And so here we have an example of downloading specific files from an item. You can choose specific files also with globbing, and you can use this IA list to list the files that belong to a given item. So once you have the item identifier, you can get a list of exactly what the contents of the item are with the IA list command. And now that we know how to download items and files, and we'll take a look at what we need to do to actually upload a file. So, as you might guess, it's not quite enough, to just say upload file name. What you need to do is provide an identifier, and then note one or more files that are going to be included in this upload, and include at least a couple of additional metadata items. Actually, there are two examples of metadata items here, but this blah.arg would, of course, be a custom metadata item if you were actually interested in including blah there. You don't have to do that. But what you do have to do is include a media type if you want your media type to be anything other than a data media type. So if you want to note that something is text and should be available in the variety of text formats that the archive will convert text uploads to, you want to note in this media type that this is text, or movies, or audio. And a bit earlier in the file, we have a bit earlier in this documentation, we have details for the different types of metadata-related commands, both showing metadata that's associated with an existing item, as well as setting and updating metadata on uploaded items. I apologize. I probably rushed through this last bit of this more than I'd hoped. Thank you again for being my guinea pigs here. I will. I'll switch back to this window where I have just a couple of slides and. And I'm sure you have had plenty of time to note the Save Page Now bookmarklet. I do have this slide showing the links that I've referred to in this talk. The main ones are the archive.org website itself. Oops. The archive.org website itself, the wonderful documentation at Internet Archive, readthedocs.io. Lots and lots of Internet Archive projects are, have repos at github.com, and lots of Internet Archive projects are being written in Python these days. So if you're interested in contributing to the archive with code or documentation, you can find lots of opportunities to do so at the archive's GitHub. And additional links that I've referred to in this talk are over on this side. And we'll say that's it for now. Thank you so much for your attention and for being guinea pigs for this talk. I'm Barbara Miller at GalGeek on Twitter, and the few slides that I have, including that slide that shows all the links, are at this tinyurl.com beyond Wayback. Well, absolutely. One of the things one of the pieces of metadata that you can associate with anything that you upload to the archive is what sort of copyright you as the owner of, and you're asserting some ownership of the content that you upload there. So, it'll depend a little bit on what the copyright is on any particular item, but everything at the site, well, nearly everything at the site is freely available to everyone. So it's really up to you, and if there is a copyright owner with significant copyright interest in something, the Internet Archive will let them deal with you. They're not really going to get involved in pursuing how people are using items that are uploaded to the archive. Thank you.